into another edition of Bama and Bourbon with Aaron Suttles from EA, Alabama. I'm Lance Taylor from the Next Round, and we have a special guest right here in our green room from Company Distilling, Master Distiller Jeff Arnett. Thanks for stopping by, buddy.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good to see you.
It's nice to meet you as well.
So this is awesome because the last time I saw this guy, he brought me to this incredible event. I bet you are one of the few that know about this, the Whiskey House in Nashville.
Yes, yeah, JB's, yeah, John Brittle. Yeah.
It was, I mean, if you're a bourbon consumer, it's just an incredible experience.
It's got the biggest collection I think I've ever seen in one place.
Well, I think it's the biggest collection in the world according to bourbons plus whiskeys, right? Over 6,000 bottles.
It was incredible.
If it's not the largest, it's got to be in the top handful.
So we're excited because this product now, I was going to say, I guarantee that you are in there.
Yeah, we are in there.
But you're now in the state stores in Alabama where we originate out of, so we're excited about that. We've got a partnership on the next round with Company Distilling, but you've got an incredible background in these products that you have now brought to our state of Alabama. We'll get into that. Let's do a little back dive on you first as I pour the first. And which one am I going to, should we go, let's go light to heavy. How about that?
That was usually what I tell people is you can kind of do an escalation of proof and just kind of build up to it. But yeah, the lowest proof that we do is a Tennessee whiskey, and we do a toasted applewood on it, 86.5 proof. 865 being East Tennessee's area code. Not that I expect that to resonate much here in Alabama.
No, but that's really cool. You and Aaron were talking about that a little bit
when
before.
Alabama wants to retreat to the mountains, we are their state to do that. So
the details,
we're right outside we're right outside the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Townsend. Also have a place in Lynchburg.
These are those little talking points when you're sharing a bottle of bourbon with good company, by the way, which we like to point out. These are the little stories that when you're pouring somebody this, you like to tell them that because there's always a really cool story usually behind every bourbon. But back to your roots before we get into this exact one. You were the master distiller at Jack Daniels.
I was.
And
so obviously Tennessee whiskey would be kind of important to me, coming with that background since they're the ones who made it famous. But I'm a native Tennessean, even though I graduated from the University of Alabama. So I spent quite a few years here in this state as well.
All three of us did.
Yeah, Bama and bourbon. Bama and bourbon. Cheers, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers.
But yeah, if you look at a Tennessee whiskey, historically what separates those from bourbons is the charcoal mellowing process. So this is a traditional Tennessee whiskey. In every other regard, it would be very similar to a bourbon in how it's constructed, but it's an 80-10-10 grain bill. 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley. Historically, also, the oldest Tennessee whiskeys like George Dickel and Jack Daniels had one thing in common, and that is they had about a half to a third of the typical rye content of a bourbon. Replacing corn with rye, taking rye out and putting corn in, basically takes the spice level down and increases the sweetness. So Tennessee whiskeys tend to be a little bit sweeter, and I think the applewood actually gives it a little bit of a cinnamon spice here. So sometimes I'm looking for the wood to offset what is natural about the liquid. This one I thought was just kind of simple and sweet. It needed something to give it a little bit more of spice and character. The applewood did really well in that regard. But
do you run across some bourbon enthusiasts that are like, they look down on the Tennessee whiskey a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. I call them, they're bourbon snobs. They're Scotch
snobs.
They're the worst. They're the
worst people are bourbon snobs.
Yeah, but there are Scotch snobs who kind of look down on all American whiskey as well. And I don't think either of them are necessarily right.
That's just the way it is,
it's
right?
It's just the way it is. Yeah.
So we were talking, and Suttles, you'll love this. So Jeff was giving a little bit of his background when he was at the university. I mean, how did you fall into becoming a distiller?
I was going to ask you that question too.
So it was not, at least if they had this at career day in high school that you could be a distiller, I missed that. What I thought I wanted to do coming out of high school was work in the automotive field. I'm still a gearhead, love cars. So the logical degree for me at that time was to get an engineering degree. So I had scholarships to a school up in Tennessee. I started there. Once I'd exhausted those, I came to Alabama and graduated from there. I actually had an interview with a division of General Motors in Athens, Alabama, at Saginaw. And then right before I graduated, they laid off like 4,000 people at General Motors, had a hiring freeze everywhere. So my hometown of Jackson might not be famous for much, but it's where all the Pringles potato chips are made. It was where Duncan Hines cake mixes and frostings were made. Procter & Gamble owned those brands. They had a great reputation in town. I dropped a resume with them, and they invited me to interview down in New Orleans at the Folger Coffee Company. So that started a career in food and beverage.
But you know, this is a little different. It's almost like, I don't know if you've seen Moneyball, on Billy Bean and the A's, and how they go to, these analytics and, MIT grads to come in.
It's all like young kids that are into chemistry now, right?
Yeah.
And it's so specialized. The old school master distillers are kind of dying out, right?
Well,
is that good? Is that bad? Are you indifferent on this?
It's bad.
I think if you look at people who wear the title of master distiller, some of them are like the latest family member of the founders of the brand. So they serve as an ambassador, important role to be a face and a voice to the public. My route to that at Jack Daniel's was very different. Of course, Jack Daniel's died in 1911. He had nephews that he willed the distillery to. They sold it to Brown-Forman in 1956, and then at that point, it kind of got turned over to the townspeople. But I was the first one who was not either a family member or that wasn't born or raised in Lynchburg who took the title of master distiller.
Yeah.
But I came into Jack Daniel's as a quality control manager. So I spent 10 years with Procter & Gamble. I made coffee, I made juice drinks, I made potato chips. So I'd been in 3 different states working in food and beverage, and they needed a quality control manager, and that was good for me because quality touched everything there. Jack Daniel's, I think when you visit it, it comes off to be a pretty small town, but a small operation. It's not. I mean, there's 90-something warehouses, over 3,000 acres of land. Quality touched everything, so it allowed me to work everywhere. So I had a really good working knowledge from that role to just take over and oversee all the manufacturing there.
So it's Bama Bourbon Special Edition, out of season. We typically do this through basketball, and then we start football, but we've got Master Distiller Jeff Arnett from Company Distilling, a new partner here on the next round. Like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, Bama Bourbon. Share if you like Bama or bourbon or both. Aaron Suttles from Yale, Alabama. How can people get involved in the collective?
Yeah.
I know a big get today or a big save last night with Labaron Philon pulling his name out of the NBA draft and coming back.
Yeah.
I know the collective was part of this.
Huge. Yay-alabama.com. There's a whole story behind the Labaron thing that's been going on behind the scenes.
Do we get to see that at Yay, Alabama?
No, I mean it was never like really in your face. I just have been, was it 2 weeks ago he comes out and says, I'm not coming
No
back.
chance. But we had Oates on the show a little bit after that, and he was like, we're going to save him a roster spot.
Uh,
Well, I would always listen. I purposely stay out of the contract. So when people ask me questions, I can honestly say, I don't know. And it avoids me having to lie, and I don't have a very good poker face. But I would always ask, what's going on with Barron? And I would always just get a look. And the look told me everything I needed to know. So Tuesday of this week, I said, hey, what's going on with LeBaron? And, and I just got a look. I'm like, well, he just said he's staying in the draft, and the person that responded to me said, I know what he said. And they shot me a grin. So then yesterday, I'm like, okay, we're coming down to it. Do I need to prepare for anything? They're like, not right now. I got a text message at 9:41 last night, go, and then we got told to hold. There were some last-minute snags being worked out, and then we went live with it at 10:31, and we shut down the internet if you're an Alabama fan. We broke it.
Bourbon, crazy category. NIL space right now is insane.
During the stress, if you've ever broken news, it's an adrenaline pumping thing. And so as I'm sitting on it, I've been told to hold on it, you're refreshing Twitter to make sure you don't get scooped on it. I told my wife, I'm like, and I swear to goodness, go pour me a bourbon. And I don't drink.
See, and these are the things that, like, he is close to the vest because he didn't share it with the next round. We weren't the ones to break it.
No, so I
needed you on bourbon last night. If we would have been at your country club drinking bourbon, I probably would have gotten the scoop and been able to bust it before anybody.
But I did drink last night.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Calm me down.
Okay, so Jeff Arnett, Master Distiller, is in Company Distilling. It's a new bourbon. You need to try this. Available at ABC stores across the state. For more information, you can learn at companydistilling.com/Alabama. Must be 21 plus. Enjoy responsibly. So we go from the 80 proof.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
the lowest proof, it's
86.5.
the lightest. It's also the one, if you're thinking about not just what you're tasting, but where you're tasting, it's the most forward in the mouth, which is where the sweet taste buds are.
It's very sweet.
Yeah, when you move to this
Very
next
light.
one, this one's going to be more balanced. It's going to have a richer, fuller mouthfeel. This is a wheated bourbon that has a toasted maple finish on it. It goes up to 90 proof, so just a slight step up in proof. But this was the one that I felt like was the best lead for us. I feel like it's the one that has the most appeal, and it's simply because I called this approachable complexity. If you can create one bottle that, whether somebody might be a new drinker or they might have a fairly mature palate, is there one bottle that they can both enjoy? If you can't afford to put 50 bottles in your cabinet at home,
Right.
but you're wanting to pour something really nice that everybody gets along with, is there in
This
that
one's
bottle?
nice.
This is the one that I feel like kind of bridges that gap.
Yeah. I think this one, if you're just getting into bourbon, you're a little intimidated, you don't like the burn so much, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, it is. This is my entry point, and that's what I intended.
So is one of these your baby? Because you talked about on the next round when Jeff was in there with us that, you know, the way you drink a bourbon it's almost like, you know, picking a favorite child.
Yeah.
I mean, you being the guy that actually creates this, do you have a preference?
You know, I feel like for most people, the Maplewood finished bourbon is going to be at least their starting point. If they find that that's maybe a little bit too much, that they might want to try the Tennessee whiskey. If they want something a little more, some people are going to taste this and go, yeah, I'd like a little more punch.
Yeah.
The rye kind of comes into that category. So what's nice about it is not,
trick in that regard.
what's nice about it is not just any individual one. I think it's the choice and the range that we're able to create, and we're doing it all through natural means. These are straight Tennessee whiskey, straight bourbon, straight rye, no artificial ingredients at all. We're just using grains and wood and yeast and water to create the different flavors profiles that we create here.
So we're consumed in all states, not just Alabama where you originate out of, but you guys are available now in Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina, anywhere West Coast, any Northeast, or are we starting to build?
The furthest west we go right now, we have Colorado, Oklahoma, and Texas. So we kind of started out in Tennessee and went to Georgia with the same distributor covers those two states. They also offered the opportunity to go to Colorado, and since then we really, as a small company, you want to make sure you're able to cover the market. So Alabama is really good for us simply because it's so close. I've got family members here.
Is Colorado a good bourbon state? I mean, I think of dispensaries when I think Colorado. I just think they're smoking weed all the time.
I would say that I feel like there's more market there than we've been able to fully explore yet. But as you know, as the brand grows, we certainly think that there's potential
great
there.
Water source.
No, that's true.
So,
Yeah. To me, when I consider what are the things, an attribute of a state or an area you wanted to make whiskey, you want good water, you want a four seasons climate, you want good agricultural ground. Ideally, you would also have like oak trees if you're making barrels, things of that nature. When it comes to Tennessee, it's the biodiversity of trees beyond oak, the maple, other varieties, apple trees. So both nut and fruit trees that we're able to use that are indigenous to Tennessee. I always say it's nice to kind of look at what Mother Nature's providing you and use that to create unique flavors.
That's got a good flavor profile to it.
Yeah, to me, this one's partially column distilled and partially pot distilled, so it has a little bit of an air of Woodford to it.
I love Woodford.
Okay.
People hate on it, but I love it.
Why do you think that is? Because you know you've talked about it. He's done the bourbon tour.
Yeah.
And was it Woodford or Makers you said was the nicest?
In my opinion, Woodford's got the most beautiful property, but Makers is also really beautiful too.
But why do you think why do people shit on Woodford? I mean,
because they produce a consistent product that's a little higher than it probably should be, but it's because of their marketing.
Yeah, it's to me.
And you can get it everywhere. It's widely available.
Yeah.
So
part of it is I think Woodford answered a need. Most American whiskey is going to be column distilled, which creates a thinner, lighter spirit traditionally than what you see in a Scotch whiskey, which is pot distilled. It's heavier and oilier. They created something in Woodford that's a hybrid product, so it uses a little bit of each. And it's when people like Woodford, I think what they're responding to is maybe they wanted something a little bit more than an American whiskey or bourbon was offering, but they weren't really into Scotch, the smoke, the peat, the dirt, the iodine,
I've never gotten into
all those
peat.
things.
I can't do it.
If I drink a Scotch, it's typically like sherry cask stuff.
Yeah.
But to me, there was a need there for people who wanted not just flavor, but it's the mouthfeel, it's the viscosity, it's the weight, and the interest that it creates. So I replicated that in this product. It's the only one that I do the hybrid. Yeah. It's the only one I do the hybrid process on, but it's really nice.
So you talked about Jack Daniels died in 1911, and I'm watching Peaky Blinders finally. I've finally gotten into it with the subtitles. Ryan Brown saved me on that. But every time I'm watching, I'm like, I kind of want an Irish whiskey because I'm more of a bourbon guy. But how true to taste do you think things are from 100 years ago to where they are now?
You know, I would like to think that they're better today. It may not be true, and that's simply because you do have just an explosion of small craft distillers. Not all of them have figured it out. So, you know, you can't look at price and know that, you know, the quality.
100%.
Yeah, quality and price don't track.
And that's why consumers get so confused and
and that's
intimidated.
why JB was telling us back to the whiskey house, like every other day somebody's going out of business because of the oversaturation right now.
Well, you know, if you look at bourbon, it's a growing category, but a few years ago, everybody decided it was going to double in size. So we're producing twice as much bourbon now as we were just, you know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, yet the consumer base has not doubled. And the COVID checks have run out, you know, that people were out spending, buying high dollar brown water. So I think that's going to be a challenge. You know, I'm glad that we as a company didn't kind of over-project all of those trends. We didn't try to bite off more than we could chew. We're not too far out over our skis. We're in 9 states. We still have ample growth. So even if the market's contracting, we still have a big horizon to look at as a company.
So let me
when
ask
you're Jack Daniel's, though, you can't hide. If the market contracts, you're already fully saturated in the market.
Yeah.
If you've projected 5% growth, you're not going to get it when the market's down 3 or 4%.
So available in 9 states, but we are consumed in 50 states. When you go to companydistilling.com, is there a way to order it where you can have it delivered in any of the other states?
You know, Kentucky got out on this issue years ago, and they created a thing called Bourbon Without Borders. And it has to be an interstate commerce agreement. So they've got 18 states that have all agreed to ship back and forth between them. Unfortunately, we're located in Tennessee. They're not a part of that.
Alabama's a whole other issue.
We do.
Yeah, we are.
But
Don't get me started.
But we do have someone out of Washington, D.C. So if you go to Sealbox online right now, you can basically, if you're in one of the 17, 18 states or whatever they're participating, you can get it shipped to your house.
Okay, so from kind of the beginner bourbon we talked about.
You said this is 91.3?
This one is 90 proof.
90 proof.
Yeah, yeah.
So for me, it goes very good, but this is more my speed.
Yeah.
But you haven't had this one yet.
I've not.
Okay. This one's exciting for me.
Yep.
Because I have, and I was telling Jeff on the next round earlier today that I have become more of a rye fan the more we've done this show. Yeah. Like, there was maybe a little too much of a spice to it.
In the beginning.
That just didn't hit right for me. But the more I consume the ryes, the more I like them.
Well, and I think ryes have gotten better, honestly. There were only just a handful of ryes. The rye category was almost disappeared up until about 2010. You had maybe a few brands that had held on in that space. But then there's been sort of a revitalization of rye whiskey. And it is I would say right there with bourbon, it was like one of the first American whiskeys, because this was a grain that was native here.
Is it minty?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a mint. It's going to be a mint and licorice.
That's good.
It's going to have
pull.
a little salt pepper, and then it has a dried fruit. So this is 100% rye grain bill. This is a dark pumpernickel rye. It's a 5% malted rye, so it's actually 100% or all in. You only have to be 51% rye to be a rye, but I'm like, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it.
Might as well go all in.
Yeah.
So why the idea to go rye with the cherry wood? I know you said the woods are important.
Yep. Of all the woods that I work with, cherry wood is actually the wood that I find that what you extract from the wood is very much aligned to the fruit. So when you think about what cherries taste like, this wood actually follows that. Maple doesn't necessarily taste like maple nuts. Apple wood doesn't necessarily taste like apple fruit. But this one does. Ryes tend to be kind of peppery and spicy in general. If there's anything that I think kind of helps them round them out, it's something that's slightly sweeter. So this dried fruit that comes out of this, I think actually helps settle this. This is 100 proof, but I think it sips way below that. Yeah. And it's not just black pepper and sawdust. And,
Isn't it amazing how detailed these things are? I mean, it's like
he's right. Like when you taste a normal rye, it hits you immediately.
Yeah.
It's a punch.
That's what we were talking about in there. Like it pops, throughout the sternum, and you just don't get that. But it is pretty crazy, I mean, people that are, in the culinary arts, how specific you are on ingredients. With you being a master distiller, do you ever come across something you're like, that is awful?
Yeah, and I try to never mention other brands by name. Yeah. They're all SOBs. That's some other brands. Yeah. But
So
occasionally you get something that's pretty disappointing.
No, but I was going to say, like, you experimenting yourself, trying to find the right formulas. As far as the other brands, I mean, nothing should be awful. Now we've had some, and we try to be biased.
We have to keep a straight face.
Yeah.
And then after we're like, that was complete shit.
Well, one of the things that you get with the brands that have been around for a long time is consistency. Whether that's your brand, whether you like that or not. Something that comes out of Jim Beam or Wild Turkey or Jack Daniel's or
even Evan Williams.
Yeah, Evan Williams, Heaven Hill brands. The ones that have been at it a long time, they may have made some choices in how they present the product, the grain bills that they've chosen, the yeast cultures that they use, but the consistency is there, and you don't necessarily see that when you go to some of the new brands that are like taking pride in the fact that they're making everything for themselves. It's like, sometimes sourcing is not a bad thing, especially when you're still trying to figure it out.
Right.
One of the worst bottles I ever got was from a newer distiller, and it was something they distilled in-house. and it was all about the type of corn that they used. And I'm like, it must have been in Grandma's basement for like 5 years and gotten moldy, because that's all I can taste is must. Yeah, it is terrible. So for me, I would rather source to get, even though we're working towards having everything being produced in house, but I'd rather source something and then give it a unique ending. So for me, it's better for us, I've learned, to not use, we don't do a lot of stuff that has age statements on it, but part of that is to impress somebody with an age statement. It needs to be 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I would say that liquid is already finished. Yeah. There's not much else you're going to be able to do to it. It's better for us as a company when I want to introduce a unique wood onto the finish that I catch it sooner, where it's fairly mature already, but it still has that final chapter to be written. Now, where you can author something a little different, you write a different ending.
This guy knows as much as far as just a bourbon consumer, and that's what he is. He's not a professional, so to speak, but knows as much as
I know very little. But
any other bourbon consumer I know.
What do you think about that rye?
But
you don't normally get a flavor profile.
It's all black pepper.
But I want to ask you this, because what we try to do is we try to inform. I mean, this is a passion for us. We love it. It's something that I really only do on weekends.
We just feel like it's been not that it's gate kept, but there's so many out there, and people want to get into it, but they're afraid. There's so many bourbon snobs. They're afraid of what their friends are going to think. And I've always told them, start somewhere and you like what you like. Don't let anyone tell you how to drink it or any of that.
And that's what, we give our advice, but from you being in the space day to day and being a master distiller, what would you tell like a bourbon beginner the best way to really put their toe into the pool?
We were just talking about it. Everybody kind of gets behind. I hope people that are open to new brands will look at ours. But I think a good starting point is to try the tried and true brands and kind of figure out among them, which are your favorites, and then maybe investigate people who are doing something in that lane, but maybe a little bit different. I'm hoping that people who maybe started out with Jack Daniels and said, well, I like Jack Daniels, but I would like to venture beyond just those boundaries, that they'll say, okay, the guy that was a master distiller here, he now does this brand. So is that enough to give me confidence that it's worth taking the risk, if we're not doing an in-store tasting, to say I'm going to take a shot and just grab one of those bottles and see what I think. And I'm counting on the fact they won't be disappointed. That even though we're a new company, this isn't really our first rodeo, and that doesn't just speak to me. I mean, there's a handful of us that have about 70, 80 years of industry experience that helped form this company.
I'll try to analogize it. I'm a big movie guy. And so, if I like a gangster genre, if there's, whether it's a prohibition gangster genre or it's cartel, I want to give those movies a shot. So is that kind of like bourbon? I know that might be a terrible analogy.
No, but you'll kind of get that from Netflix. If you hear about a movie, you go watch something, and then based on what you've watched, and we're catching a theme here. It's like, we suggest you try these. These are lesser known titles.
Would this be a great app for bourbons?
It could be great.
Could we start this on the fly right here, and based on what you like, if you like Company Distilling,
because
these are the other
everyone's going to have their
bourbon.
everyday pour. But you can't just drink your everyday pour.
Well,
you have to branch out.
Part of it is there was just
literally not married to your everyday pour.
100%.
Right?
But this massive explosion that happened in bourbon, I think there will be a contraction that happens on the backside of it, because there's a lot of brands that honestly probably should not have entered the market.
We've had a lot of them.
And the market will take care of that.
I can pull some right here.
It'll contract back, and then only the strong will survive.
I bet we've got some back here that haven't survived.
I want to ask him this, because you've been involved in every aspect of your business, right? Yeah. We sort of have a running joke with us. The more you try to trick up your bottle or your label or some elaborate backstory that's probably a quarter true, we look at it.
The more words that are on your label, the less you actually have to say.
It's such a gimmick for a lot of
it.
You're trying to distract me from something.
We have probably one of the simplest labels, because there was actually more to say.
Good weight on the bottle, though.
But we had more to say than we could ever fit on a bottle. So we're like, let's just stick to the basics.
Right.
Hopefully they'll recognize my signature or my name from Jack Daniels, and that'll be a reason to believe. But we use straights with wood finishes. So straight Tennessee whiskey, straight bourbon, straight rye. There's no artificial ingredients or gimmicks or anything going on. I can assure you that there is nothing else in the market that are any of these. And that is where I think most people are getting tricked. is that you have people buying the same barrels, and they might be doing slightly different age points or slightly different proof points, but the labels look so different that you think you're buying something different,
Right.
and then you taste them and go, well, this tastes just like that. And I'm like, it tastes just like that because it is that. It's the same stuff.
So this is a very generic beginner question.
Yeah.
But when I was drinking bourbon back in the day, and it was back in the 90s, and there were a lot of screw tops. Everything almost seems to be the cork now.
Yeah.
I think my first cork was a rare breed Wild Turkey 101 way back in the day.
Yep.
Why is it important to have the cork?
I don't know that it is. It's a consumer
I think
perception and quality.
It makes you feel like it's more part of the experience.
It is.
In my judgment.
Honestly, if we wanted to go with a synthetic cork, they're no more expensive, no less expensive to do that. From a supply chain
But just think about the
standpoint, they're
sensory
easier to
issues of
get.
how it sounds when you pop it versus that's part of the experience.
The cork oaks only grow in like Spain and Portugal. So this is kind of showing the level of commitment that you've got to be able to do it. To do it with a stained top with your logo on it.
Yeah, I like the stained top.
Yeah, we're basically saying, hey, we're doing it the right way. We're doing some very traditional processes, even though we're putting sort of a more modern spin on it.
Important,
It
right?
is
100%.
A thick glass base on a bottle projects quality. You can be the best smelling cologne on the planet, but if you're in a plastic container in Walmart, nobody's going to want to buy that, right? Yeah. They were looking for crystal cut glass and things of that nature that kind of project that this is good. I'm going to smell good. I'm going to feel good when I wear it.
I mean, that's part of it.
So you project that in your brand as well.
We've done some bourbons and whiskeys that look like wine bottles. I'm just like,
yeah.
No defense. I mean, they have a fine product, and I keep seeing that.
I would just say not to go into the horrors of launching during the pandemic, but this is not even the bottle we wanted.
Really?
Some of the choices that we were forced to make during that time just to be able to move forward and have supply chain feed us. Of all the things that we got kind of forced upon us, actually the bottle changing is the one I'm happiest with, because the bottles that look good sometimes in your catalog that the company's kind of selling you glassware through, when you hold them in your hand, they don't quite measure up to what they look like in the photo. You kind of realize it was like a lot of the photos that you see on Facebook. There are a lot of filters going on there, right? But this bottle actually, in the hand, looking at it, holding it, it's a better bottle than what we were going to do. But so we literally had to make a bottle change at the last hour. Had to rework all of our label graphics to launch on time.
So so 4 years into this, or we're coming up on 4 years, I can kind of tell what he likes, if he's bullshitting you or not. I think we like all of this very good. We need to come up with some kind of signal for the people that watch every day that we know that we can kind of
on the
tap
really bad
something.
ones, I was like, try to signal, don't go waste your money on this, but I don't want to be disrespectful to people who put their money in.
But we all agree this is fantastic. We're excited to have Company Distilling not only on our platform, but in state.
Alabama grad.
Alabama grad from Tennessee, which is crazy. But Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina, 9 different states. CompanyDistilling.com/Alabama. You get more information, the states that are available. If you're in Kentucky, you can get other bottles sent in, which is great. But we appreciate Jeff Arnett coming by, Master Distiller.
Before we get out of here, I got one more journalistic question. Is there a meaning behind the name Company?
That's a good one. We were also formed during a pandemic where they were shutting down bars and restaurants.
And nobody had company, right?
Well, and we were being told that we were being irresponsible if we even gathered with someone else. If you had company come over, that you were creating super spreader events or whatever. But I think if there's a silver lining that came out of the pandemic, hopefully it's that we'll never take for granted the opportunity to be with other people. I think this is a social liquid, and we are social beings.
We say that all the time. Bourbon is best shared experience.
It is. Yeah, and hopefully this is, once you discover this is something that you're going to feel good about wanting to share with people who matter to you.
But this is
companies usually not family members, but they're people who matter to you that you make memories with. We want to be the brand that you rely upon for those moments. So that's where the name came from.
But you can't drink it alone. I do it.
CompanyDistilling.com/Alabama. One more time. Yay, Alabama. How can people get involved? Labaron Philon. Big.
I'm not saying we get all the credit, but we had a big part of it. Yay-alabama.com. If you want your roster stocked full of great players, the rules are changing. Who knows where it's going with this court decision out in the Bay Area. But we appreciate everyone who's supported us, and that's why Labaron Philon will be back 2025, 2026 in an Alabama uniform.
Bama and Bourbon. Special thanks to Jeff Arnett, Master Distiller. Do him a favor, try this out if you like bourbon. Pick your poison. Literally, you're going to love this stuff. It's great. Must be 21 plus. Please drink responsibly. We'll give you more information on Company Distilling over the next couple of months on the next round. We'll be back in August talking a little SEC football, Alabama football, getting ready for Florida State. It will be here before you know it.
The Wisconsin time drop today?
Yeah, I did.
11 o'clock in
it is.
Tuscaloosa.
That
Good luck, Badgers.
That
That
shows
level of
you.
humidity in September is going to hit you like a ton of bricks.
Right. Do you watch every game?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, everyone I can. Well, being part of the founder of a company,
You got other things to do.
yeah, I'll just say, unfortunately, Saturdays in the fall are prime time
Okay,
for us to sell.
what is early for you? So I used to say this.
Right. No, I catch as many as I can.
The old CBS jingle when it came on, that was my cue to go from beer to bourbon.
Yep.
Now I have to wait until sun starts to set to go to bourbon just with age.
Yep.
Can you do the bourbon 11 o'clock games?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sure you can't professional.
But I can tell you this: I'm leaving Tennessee, going to Alabama, moved to Louisiana, then to Texas, and this is when Texas was not a part of the SEC. The local game preempted the SEC game of the week, and I'm like, okay, I am too far from home. I need to go back. I got to go back east.
And speaking of Texas,
Came back
I may have stereotyped. I've yet to find a good whiskey bourbon from Texas yet.
I don't want to plug anybody else on here. I want to ask you though when we get off.
All right.
Fair enough. Okay. Pick it up. Company Distilling. You're going to love it. CompanyDistilling.com/Alabama. Like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, share it if you like Alabama, you like bourbon. You're going to love it. It's Bama and Bourbon.